Hello history buffs and welcome back to our channel. Today we're re-diving into one of the most pivotal moments in Roman history, the transformation of a republic into an empire, and the rise of one man who would change the world forever. Let's explore how the young Octavian became the revered Augustus. Our story begins in chaos. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar, the larger-than-life dictator, is assassinated. The city of Rome is thrown into a power vacuum. Senators who plotted the murder, like Brutus and Cassius, believed they were restoring the republic, but they completely underestimated the fury of the Roman people and the ambition of the men Caesar left behind. Enter the main players. First, there's Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal and charismatic right-hand man. He was a seasoned general and a skilled politician who expected to inherit Caesar's power. Then there was Marcus Lepidus, another of Caesar's allies, a powerful figure with legions at his command. And then there was the wildcard, a young, sickly, and largely unknown 18-year-old named Gaius Octavius. He was Caesar's grandnephew, and to everyone's astonishment, Caesar's will named this teenager as his adopted son and primary heir. Suddenly he was Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, or Octavian as we call him. Antony, seeing Octavian as just a boy, dismissed him. He refused to hand over Caesar's money and papers, treating him with contempt. This was Antony's first, and perhaps greatest, mistake. Octavian might have been young, but he was shrewd, patient, and possessed an iron will. He borrowed money and, using the powerful name of Caesar, began to win over his adoptive father's veterans. He promised to fulfill Caesar's bequests to the people, immediately making himself popular. The political situation was a tangled mess. The Senate, led by the famous orator Cicero, saw an opportunity. They despised Antony and thought they could use the boy Octavian to destroy him, and then cast him aside. So, they granted Octavian official power and sent him to fight Antony's forces in northern Italy. In the ensuing battles, Octavian proved his mettle, not as a frontline general, but as a brilliant strategist and leader. Antony was defeated and forced to retreat, but then, Octavian pulled a stunning move. Instead of returning to Rome as the Senate's puppet, he marched his legions on the city itself and forced them to declare him consul, one of the highest offices in the Republic. He was only 19 years old. With Rome under his control, Octavian knew he couldn't rule alone. The assassins of Caesar, Brutus, and Cassius had amassed huge armies in the east. To face this common enemy, Octavian did the unthinkable. He formed an alliance with his rival, Mark Antony, and the powerful Lepidus. This was the Second Triumvirate, a three-man dictatorship with absolute power to remake the state. Their first order of business was brutal. To fund their wars and eliminate political enemies, they initiated proscriptions, a horrifying state-sanctioned hit list. Thousands of wealthy senators and equestrians were executed, their property confiscated, and among the victims was Cicero, whose opposition to Antony sealed his fate. It was a bloody and ruthless start to their reign, showing just how far they were willing to go. With their enemies in Rome eliminated, the triumvirs turned their attention east. In 42 BCE, at the Battle of Philippi in Greece, the combined forces of Antony and Octavian decisively crushed the armies of Brutus and Cassius. Both assassins took their own lives, and with their deaths, the last hope of the old republic died with them. The war against Caesar's murderers was over. Now the triumvirs divided the Roman world. Antony, the senior partner, took the wealthy and glamorous East, including Egypt. Lepidus was given Africa, and Octavian was left with the difficult task of governing Italy and the West, which was riddled with unrest and land disputes. It seemed like he got the short end of the stick. But Octavian turned this challenge into an opportunity. While Antony was in Alexandria, famously beginning his love affair with Queen Cleopatra, Octavian was in Italy, painstakingly building his power base. He settled his veterans on land, a difficult and unpopular process, but it secured their absolute loyalty. He also relied on his brilliant right-hand man, Marcus Agrippa, a military genius, and Maecenas, a masterful diplomat and patron of the arts. This team was a key to his success. The peace between Antony and Octavian was fragile, marked by suspicion and rivalry. Tensions often flared, but they were patched up with political marriages, like Antony's marriage to Octavian's virtuous sister, Octavia. For a time, it seemed the alliance might hold. Antony focused on his campaigns in the east, while Octavian consolidated his power in the west. He fought wars in Illyria and finally sidelined the third triumvirate, Lepidus, taking control of his legions and territories, leaving just two titans standing. The breaking point was inevitable. In Rome, Octavian launched a masterful propaganda campaign. He painted himself as the traditional Roman, the champion of Italy and Western values. He portrayed Antony as a man who had gone native, corrupted by the decadent luxury of the East and bewitched by a foreign queen, Cleopatra. He accused Antony of planning to move the capital of the Roman world from Rome to Alexandria and to give away Roman territories to his children with Cleopatra. The final straw came when Octavian illegally obtained Antony's will and read it to the Senate. It confirmed everyone's worst fears, detailing Antony's wishes to be buried in Alexandria alongside Cleopatra. This was a public relations disaster for Antony. The people of Rome were outraged. Octavian had successfully framed the coming conflict not as another Roman civil war, but as a war of defense against a foreign threat. In 31 BCE, the two forces met for a final, epic showdown at the naval battle of Actium, off the coast of Greece. Agrippa's brilliant naval tactics trapped Antony and Cleopatra's larger, less maneuverable fleet. Seeing the battle was lost, Antony and Cleopatra broke through the blockade and fled back to Egypt, abandoning their army and navy. Their forces, leaderless and demoralized, quickly surrendered to Octavian. The war was effectively over. Octavian pursued them to Alexandria. 1 year later, facing Octavian's invasion, first Antony and then Cleopatra took their own lives. Octavian had won. At the age of 32, he was the undisputed sole master of the entire Roman world. The civil wars that had plagued Rome for a century were finally over. But now came the most difficult part. How do you rule a world you've conquered without looking like a king or a dictator? Romans had a deep-seated hatred for monarchy. Octavian knew that if he simply declared himself supreme ruler, he would likely end up like his adoptive father, Caesar. So, he began what historians call the First Settlement in 27 BCE in a brilliant piece of political theater. Octavian went before the Senate and announced that he was renouncing all his emergency powers and restoring the Republic. He handed power back to the Senate and the people of Rome. Of course, this was a carefully calculated move. The senators, many of whom owed their careers and lives to him, were terrified of more civil war. They begged him to stay and protect the state. So, they persuaded him to accept control over the most important provinces, the ones where the majority of the legions were stationed. This meant he retained command of the army, the ultimate source of his power. In that same session, the Senate bestowed upon him a new, almost divine title, Augustus, meaning the revered or illustrious one. They also granted him the name Princeps, meaning first citizen. He wasn't a king or an emperor in name. He was simply the most important man in the state, guiding the republic he had saved. Over the next several years, through a series of settlements, he fine-tuned this system. He was granted the powers of a tribune, which allowed him to veto the Senate and propose laws, and the authority of a proconsul, giving him command over the military. He controlled the treasury, the army, and the political agenda, all while maintaining the illusion that the republic was still functioning as it always had. This was his genius. He created a new political reality, the Roman Empire, but cloaked it in the familiar language and institutions of the old republic. He ushered in an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which would last for 2 centuries. The young, underestimated boy had become Augustus, the first Roman emperor, and had laid the foundations for a system of rule that would define Western civilization for centuries to come. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey from republic to empire as fascinating as I do, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history. See you next time.